All right, for more on this, let's bring in David Otto. He's the director of the Geneva Centre for Africa Security and Strategic Studies. He joins us from London. David, good to have you on the show. The government is denying rumors that there is a coup. We know that the fate of President Kabore is not 100% clear. What is clear is that there are mutinying soldiers, there are demonstrators out on the streets. What exactly is going on?
This is a very bad start for Burkina Faso for the year 2022. Of course, what we don't know yet is whether the president has been secured by the defense forces, against the mutineers, or this is, another playbook, from Mali, whereby a military coup is just inevitable. But we haven't seen any men in uniform actually, going on air and declaring themselves as, the government in place, or, kind of suspending the constitution and the parliament. We haven't seen that yet. But what we know is that there is a huge protest, calling for the resignation of the president, as we saw in the case of Mali. And again, the same rhetoric of the president being unable to deal with the security situation in the northern part. It's been echoed by these military men who are calling for the president to dismiss the military senior rank members, calling for the government to provide them with some level of operational capacity to fight against the jihadis, but more so asking for welfare, of the wounded and killed soldiers with their families. So it's a pretty much precarious situation, and we're still following it very closely.
David, hopefully we'll talk about the security situation in the north of the country in just a bit. But since you mentioned Mali, I want to ask you, we've seen a number of coups throughout that part of Africa. Mali at the top, Guinea, Chad, further to the east, Sudan. While all of them are different, is there a sort of a common denominator here?
The common denominator here is that the military is increasingly encroaching into the democratic system within that region. Of course, Burkina Faso has been called the coup capital of the world, because of the frequent coup d'etats. But what we see here is some kind of a legacy that was left by the ousting of Blaise Compaoré, in 2015. And now we're seeing, people calling for the president that they thought, would provide a solution to step down as well. We've seen that, this is some kind of as you rightly mentioned, it's becoming a cancerous process, in the region, not just in Sahel, but as you mentioned, in Sudan. We saw the same happening in Guinea. So it's not good for the continent. It's not good for the region. And this is essentially not a good step, in the beginning of the year for Burkina Faso, which, has been very vulnerable to these attacks launched by so-called jihadist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
Okay, I mean, let me ask you about that. I mean, how serious is the situation when it comes to the militant insurgency in the Sahel region?
Extremely serious. I mean, we've seen a lot of attacks being launched against Burkina Faso forces by the so-called Islamic State of the Greater Sahel and groups that are linked to Al-Qaeda. And, this has affected not just the military morale, as we saw in one of the demands, which the soldiers are saying, we want our colleagues, our comrades who have been killed in the war front, to be compensated. We want their families to receive some level of support. So it's a direct impact, not just on the military, but on the stability of the nation. The protest which is coming out, which we've seen in so many countries, in Mali and as you mentioned, in Sudan, by the people, is indicative of the fact that, Burkina Faso, it's in trouble. And, it won't take long for us to know the real situation here.
Okay. David Otto, good to have you on the show. Thank you very much.